Starting in the 1960s, when it first aired, the elite series I Dream of Jeannie won over audiences. However, it had to come to a close, as all good things do. The beloved series came to a close with an outstanding final moment, so let in #039 speak about it. The influence on fans, the poignant farewells, and the spectacular moments will be explored. To whom did the conclusion signify, both the characters and the viewers? Keep an eye out for more updates. The charming Barbara Eden and her master Tony Nelson, Larry Hagman, brought us the life of a 2-0-0-0-year-old Jeannie in the famous sitcom I Dream of Jeannie. When it first aired in 1965, the show and #039's charisma and the obvious chemistry between Jeannie and Tony made it an instant hit with viewers. It was more about a Jeannie attempting to win over her astronaut master than it was about the typical will they won and #039 they romance. But then the notorious wedding episode came around, and NBC decided to provide the happy ending to the couple. Ratings are sure to go up after a wedding. Living her finest life as a Jeannie, Barbara Eden was vehemently opposed to the idea. She was aware that if she put a ring on it, Jeannie and #039's enchantment would be sapped. Sidney Sheldon, the show and #039's creator, yelled out "No, no," despite her objections the night before. The executive, Mort Wagner, made the decision that it was necessary to proceed. A publicity stunt was even pulled off by them, orchestrating a sham wedding in order to generate buzz in advance. Let us now recall the entire censorship incident. The year was 1960. It was indecent to view Jeannie and #039's navel, let in #039's be honest. When there was even the slightest whiff of something sexual, the NBC suits would swoop in like hawks. It seemed like they were keeping an overprotective eye on the show. Do you really want to show Jeannie in a vulnerable position? Certainly not while we are in charge. Meanwhile, Jeannie wanted to spice up her master and #039's life with some PG content, but the censor said no. Writers were left rushing to come up with plots that yet had some energy in the face of all these limitations. But come on, there are only so many ways to tell the tired old narrative of a Jeannie granting wishes. After a while, not even magic could keep up without a boost. Things went south after the wedding broadcast, as fast as Jack Robeson can say. When it all started to heat up, supporters started to wonder, wait, is this it, a nuptial? Viewers and #039 interest in the program plummeted. It was time for NBC to move on, just like a terrible romance. Season 5 still had 14 episodes to go, but it was looking like it was going to end soon. We all adored Tony Nelson, Larry Hagman, but when he got back from his vacation in South America, he found out the devastating news that his program had been cancelled. Since we now know the show and #039's demise, let in #039's take a look back at its origins and how it came to be. While lounging around in the 1960s, Sidney Sheldon is likely contemplating the secrets of television magic. Considering how ABC and #039's Bewitched had become the most groundbreaking invention since the telephone, he reasoned, why not put his own spin on the magical sitcom? To be more specific, this is how Jeannie appeared in my dreams. This wonderful idea struck him while watching the 1964 film The Brass Bottle, and he decided that a beautiful female Jeannie would be the perfect fit. A Jeannie who is both magical and well-dressed is an irresistible combination. Things start to heat up now. Choosing Jeannie as the lead actor presented Sheldon with a bit of a challenge. He was searching for the perfect actor to play the part. However, one rule stood firm. Pretty blondes only. Why? He opted to contact Barbara Eden and #039's agent, who had co-starred in The Brass Bottle, after trying out a number of women who didn't and #039 quite measure up to the role. He was concerned that having a blonde Jeannie would make them too similar to the blonde witch from. Next thing you know, at 8:00 and #039 clock in the evening on September 18, 1965, I Dream of Jeannie debuted on NBC. By this moment, NBC had really embraced the color life. Already, the majority of their performances have made the transition. Yet, you won and #039 believe it. Jeannie opted to keep things simple for the first season by only using black and white. Why? It became clear that a technical nightmare was the process of making Jeannie and hashtag 039's magical effects in color. However, they managed to figure it out by the second season. All primetime programs were required to make the change in 1966, so I Dream of Jeannie got a colorful makeover right then and there. Now I and hashtag 039, I'll tell you something fascinating, though. Even Sheldon wanted to use color for the pilot episode. But NBC was acting like they were strapped for cash. In any case, we doubt this program will survive beyond its pilot. Sheldon was unfazed and even volunteered to pay the additional $400 each episode out of his own pocket. On the other hand, Jerry Hyams, an executive at Screen Gems, warned him not to fritter away his money. Timeless counsel, which is likely sound counsel when one is engaged in the entertainment industry. That is how I Dream of Jeannie came to be, thanks to imagination and perseverance. We discovered that Jeannie was and hashtag 039, always Jeannie in the pilot episode. A normal human being was she once. She received a mystical makeover from the Blue Djinn after rejecting his proposal. Alright, now we can start talking about the family. A little bit trickery goes a long way with Jeannie and hashtag 039's family. In any case, they aren't and hashtag 039 Jeannies. Even her mother makes fun of them, saying that they and hashtag 039 simply simple country folk. That candor is just charming. Episode 14 of Season 1 titled "What House Across the Street" is where this is taken from. She seems to be attempting to minimize their peculiarity. Playing the role of the Blue Djinn is Michael Ansara, which just so happens to be the first husband of Barbara Eden. You would have been mistaken if you believed it was his last move. The Battle of Waikiki, episode 15 of Season 3, features him as King Kamehameha, and My Sister the Homewrecker, episode 12 of Season 5, features him as Biff Jellicoe. He possessed an impressive range. In the second season and hashtag 039's episode How to Be a Genie in 10 Easy Lessons, the mystery of where Jeannie came from is revisited. Jeannie states, she was a genie when I left Baghdad, in reference to her sister, who shares her name. Her sister and hashtag 039's genie lamp is so unusual that it makes you question whether it was innate or if it was a clearance find. Let us now recall the unsolved riddle of Jeannie and hashtag 039's birthday. She confidently states that her birthdate is July 1st in G.I. Jeannie, episode 5 of Season 1. I mean, throwing a party in 21 BC is rather impressive. The girl who was never born, though, appeared in episode 10 of Season 2. She completely disregards her own birthday. This is the first in a two-part series in which a computer named Eric determines that her birth year was 64 BC. Although Roger finds out her true birthday in the first part of the arc in My Master the Great Caruso, he doesn't and hashtag 039 get to disclose it until the second part. Let me give you a hint, April 1st. So her birthday is on the same day as April Fool and hashtag 039's day, which is, in my opinion, a perfectly appropriate birthday for a genie. In Season 3, the plot shifts to show that Jeannie has never changed. I Dawn and hashtag 039, TC why not? Everyone in her family has also become a genie. Actually, her mom makes an appearance in Season 4, beginning in Episode 2, Jeannie and the Wild Pipchicks, and she is also played by Barbara Eden. The authors intend to turn each one of them into a gene. The remainder of the series continued with this revised backstory. Now let in hashtag 039's go to I Dream of Jeannie, a 1985 television movie. Here, 15 years later, Jeannie opens up to Tony Jr. about her history. She reveals that after she rejected a wicked djinn, he imprisoned her in a bottle. But whether that indicates she was already a genie before he transformed her or not is still up for debate. Also, you would be mistaken to suppose that and hashtag 039's where Jeannie and hashtag 039's narrative ends. I Dream of Jeannie, a paperback novel published in 1966 by Al Hine under the pen name Dennis Brewster, is another option. This fictional story takes place in Tehran centuries before Tony finds the bottle belonging to Jeannie, real name Fawzia, and her family, who are genies. From the show and hashtag 039's South Pacific vibes, that and hashtag 039's quite a change. Now that you are familiar with Jeannie, we can move on to the plot of the movie. just what was going on? Captain Tony Nelson, an astronaut preparing for a day that doesn't and hashtag 039, T follow the training handbook, is introduced in the pilot episode, The Lady in the Bottle. He was flying solo when his capsule went off course and crashed on a remote island in the South Pacific. It must be pure chance, doesn't and hashtag 039, T it? As he strolls along the shore, he notices a weird bottle whirling about. After removing the cork, he can and hashtag 039, T help but rub it, and lo and behold, a genie emerges. However, this genie is unlike any other. A beautiful Persian woman who greets him with a kiss that could set sail 1,000 ships adrift greets him. At first, Tony believes he has hit his head harder than he anticipated or that he is dreaming. Once Tony wants Jeannie to speak English, then they can communicate. Telling her she and hashtag 039 's free to depart is his way of expressing his thanks, he and hashtag 039 's overjoyed. However, Jeannie has different intentions after spending 2 millennia confined in that container. Because she is completely smitten with Tony, she puts herself back into her bottle and secretly puts it in his duffel bag so she can accompany him home. A little bit of a housewrecker, Jeannie appears in the first few episodes. Her role in breaking off Tony and hashtag 039 's engagement to the daughter of the general, Melissa, stands out. The irony is that Melissa then mysteriously disappears. A love triangle, according to producer Sidney Sheldon, would only add unnecessary drama. Tony first keeps Jeannie under wraps, perhaps thinking, end quote, out of sight, out of mind, end quote, for the most part. However, he does decide to let her out and enjoy herself in the end. Keep in mind that she frequently causes mayhem while she has fun. Because she loves Tony so much, Jeannie strives to be there for him, but things never work out the way she plans. Things start to get funny here. Because Tony is terrified of losing his position in the space program if word gets out about Jeannie and hashtag 039 's magical existence, he is always putting on a show to cover for her antics. Colonel Dr. Alfred Bellows, a NASA psychiatrist, later arrived, and he was of the opinion that Tony was either entirely insane or concealing something. The plot revolves around the fact that Bellows observes Jeannie and hashtag 039 's magical pranks but is unable to capture her red-handed. On the contrary, Tony is the one who usually comes up with the most absurd explanations, leaving him perplexed and coming up with strange notions. The fact that Jeannie and hashtag 039 's powers always go out once she and hashtag 039 's confined is another amusing turn of events. In the event that the bottle is faulty, she will be left with no remedy. Nothing wiggles or ambiguous about it. A key plot point has her stranded in a NASA vault. Roger, Tony and hashtag 039 's carefree sidekick, doesn't and hashtag 039 T realize they're in hashtag 039 's a mystical genie in his very own home for the first 16 episodes. How on earth can you fail to notice a beautiful genie within a spherical bottle? Even when they cross paths in episode 12, Roger has no idea. However, mayhem breaks out as soon as he learns that Jeannie is, in fact, a genie. In an act of pure mischief, he takes possession of her bottle and proclaims himself her new ruler. Roger is a kind person in general, but he has a reputation for being a bit of a swoon-worthy clingy guy who is secretly interested in Jeannie and her magical abilities. Despite his pranks, he generally acknowledges and appreciates Tony and Jeannie and hashtag 039 's bond. The inaugural season concludes with Tony and Roger being promoted to the majors. Even Roger and hashtag 039 's backstory undergoes some changes as the series progresses. To ensure he is aware of Jeannie at all times, they opt to retcon his character. On that ill-fated space expedition, he and Tony found her. What fascinating talks they must have had. The second season then introduces the unforgettable evil twin sister of Jeannie. She shares the same name as the original Jeannie, thus it and hashtag 039 's safe to say that she is also called Jeannie. Let it be known that Barbara Eden ISN and hashtag 039 T going to be named Miss Congeniality after pulling off this wigged-out brunette Jeannie. This manipulative sister first appears in season 3, namely in the episode end quote, Jeannie or the Tiger end quote, and she has a singular objective. In order to kidnap Tony and turn him into her puppet master. I mean, who can resist the sibling rivalry? The other sister always manages to up the ante just when you think you and hashtag 039 got it figured out. Take a look at it from this angle now. The wicked sister makes one more attempt to abduct Tony immediately following his wedding to Jeannie. This time, her scheme involves Michael Ansara, who plays Barbara Eden and #039's real-life husband. In a charming turn of events, she and #039's secretly rolling her eyes at him as she acts smitten. Towards the beginning of Season 5, Jeannie receives an unexpected visit from her uncle Sully, played by Jackie Coogan, who informs her that she must assume the role of queen of their native Basenji. It seems glitzy, doesn't and #039 it? Everything changes, though, when Tony inadvertently offends Basenji and #039's sense of national pride, sparking a feud with Castia, their neighbor. Tony is subsequently pressured by Uncle Sully to wed Jeannie. On his way to NASA to exact revenge on Basenji for dishonoring his country by kidnapping the Castia ambassador. Tony has had enough of Sully causing issues by casting Tony as the main suspect in multiple botched assassination attempts. In his frustration, he states categorically that he would never marry Jeannie, regardless of how rare she was. When Tony realizes he needs Jeannie badly enough, he boards a plane to Basenji in the hopes of winning her back. Upon their eventual reunion, he announces her as his fiancée. I bet you didn't and #039 realize that the iconic bottle of Jeannie was and #039 originally created for the program. The decanter, which belonged to Jim Beam Liquor, had been filled with Beam and #039's choice bourbon whiskey since Christmas 1964. It was created for the Wheaton Bottle Company by Roy Kramer. Jeannie would be the ideal vehicle for a humorous tale that show creator Sidney Sheldon got as a present. It appears that first-season director Gene Nelson saw the bottle in a liquor store, bought it, and brought it to Sheldon, while other members of Screen Gems and #039 art department also asserted that they found it. They preserved the dark smoky green hue and elaborate painted gold leaf pattern on Jeannie and #039's bottle from the first season, so it looked vintage. The green bottle was the description given to the pilot episode by the TV Guide in September 1965. If you caught the pilot, you might recall that it appeared battered and worn. There was no need for vibrant colors because the show was shot in black and white. But when they went to color, the art director instead gave Jeannie a bottle that was dazzling purple. To make it match the bottles used in subsequent seasons, they even attempted to colorize the first season, implying that the original smoked glass was purple. The original stopper was left behind on the beach where Tony met Jeannie, so he used a clear glass stopper from an old grandfather bourbon bottle in his house for the first season bottle. In the first episode using color, we see Jeannie back at the beach with her bottle and its original cork, which was painted to match. On her way back, she probably picked it up. Following that, the original stopper was utilized for the remainder of the series and even in the movies. The plastic rings that hold the cork in place can be seen if you look attentively in some shots. In the first season, they frequently utilized a screen overlay of swirling smoke to create the enchanted smoke illusion, occasionally accompanied by animation. Animated smoke was their sole reliance in those early color programs. Later on, though, they splurged and used a wire to suspend a live smoke pack from the bottle. While Blue Jeans and #039 bottle featured a vibrant green wash in the pilot, Jeannie and #039's bottle was mostly painted in pastel pinks and purples for the color episodes. A plain, unadorned Jim Beam bottle belonged to Jeannie and #039's sister as well. Nobody knows for sure how many bottles were utilized in the event, but the crew estimates that about 12 bottles were painted and utilized. The smoke effects and #039 stunt bottle would frequently shatter due to the chemicals and heat used. In the pilot, the opening scene on the beach had multiple bottles. One had a smoking hole punched into the base, and Tony could use the other to stow in his backpack. Even at the beginning of the season, they manufactured a couple of bottles for promotional tours. Barbara Eden was allowed to retain the color stunt bottle that was utilized on the last day of filming for the final episode once filming concluded. During her break after the program was cancelled, her makeup artist gave her a thoughtful present. Intriguingly, as stated on the Donnie and Marie talk show, Larry Hagman also owned one, and Bill Daly had an original bottle, according to the first season DVD release. In Hurricane Jeannie, the second-to-last episode, Nelson has a dream in which Dr. Bellows learns Jeannie and #039's secret and the bottle she was carrying breaks when Nelson drops it. On camera, they display a shattered bottle. For many reruns, this episode is still considered the series finale. It and hashtag 039, it's amazing how much imagination and planning went into something as basic as a bottle, ISN and hashtag 039, it? Like an old acquaintance who unexpectedly shows up at parties, I Dream of Jeannie continues to live on in reruns, despite its sudden conclusion. Many fans still feel strongly about the wedding scene, and it frequently starts disputes that are just as heated as those over sports. To what extent was it inadequate? Were they able to save the enchantment? However, if at ISN and hashtag 039, broken, Dawn and hashtag 039, fix it, that is the classic case in point. No one asked for a wedding, so it and hashtag 039, a perfect solution. That concludes it. The moment just before I Dream of Jeannie ended. Were you of the opinion that the wedding was a good choice?